Okay.
Hey, here we are back again on a Monday night here on DJNTV. Tonight, we're going to be getting to, for some of you, this will be like the first time you get to meet Mike. For some of you, you have been following Mr. Lenstra's articles in the Disc Jockey News for years and online here for the last few years. And if you have no idea of why two old guys are going to be talking tonight, well, maybe you should go, watch the Care Bear movie or something. I don't know. They can go watch something, have fun. Because we're going to get into this tonight's show. For those of you who are in the middle of your careers, we're going to talk about that transition a little bit, and we're going to be talking about that how do you move on, or how Mike has been moving on from his career. And then if there's younger ones who are like, I'm never going to leave this industry. Okay, then come back and watch this in about 10 years. So there we are. Mike, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing well, John. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for coming on and being part of the show this evening. I'm excited we get to talk tonight.
Hey, so am I.
Yeah, this should be great. Tonight's show, by the way, is brought to you by DJ Event Planner, djeventplanner.com, which is a link in the description of this video. DJ Event Planner is one of the online tools for planning and connecting with your clients, and it has the ability to have the request for information and checking calendars and doing instant quotes and writing digital contracts and the whole 10 yards. So everything's there. You can check that out, djeventplanner.com. So Mike, for those who don't know who you are, just give us the kind of quick little elevator speech of where you work and what type of events or what you're doing right now as far as the industry. And then we're going to come back and then we'll work our way back towards that transition you've had from basically a full-time DJ to where you are today. So where's home, and what type of shows are you still doing?
Well, I am what I call semi-retired now. I went really started collecting some of my retirement benefits last year, and then really kind of knew that was really my final wind down year. Although I'll get into that a little bit later. The process was put in quite a bit before that, but I'm joined a lot of others in our industry, such as like Keith Allen, Dan Nichols, Rob DeFazio, things like that have gotten away from a lot of what I guess we would call traditional DJ events, such as weddings, bar mitzvahs, school events, college gigs, things like that. And now pretty much concentrating on doing some company events and some of the game things that are out there, like jukebox bingo, some trivia, and a few things like that. Mm-hmm. is kind of what occupies my time.
And home is in
Dubuque, Iowa.
Thank
you. As we like to say, we're on the Mississippi River, right across the river from the Iowa-Illinois border. So I can travel within any one of those three states in a matter of 20 minutes.
Nice. And that's a beautiful part of the state. When I've been through there as we've gone through and to different events. Nice area down by the Mississippi is a beautiful spot, definitely. So I want to jump back though. Let's go back in history, kind of back to the origin of your love of music, because the music side of it. Some DJs have come into this. Some guys and gals have come into it because they I wanted to make money. I think it could be a good business thing, but most of us that are went through the 70s and 80s. There was a person in our life who was the one who kind of started and kind of nurtured or inspired our love of music. Mm-hmm. Who was that for you?
Yeah. I would say it started probably when I was like 11 or 12 years old, when a neighbor gave me a record player. She was upgrading her record player, so she gave me a record player, and with maybe 7 or 8 records. And I still remember some of those records: Jam Up and Jelly Tight, and Bobby Sherman's Hey Little Woman, things like that. And I began to play those records, and then I had my weekly allowance, and I made my first trek to a record store and bought my very first record. I remember it was "I'll Meet You Halfway" by the Partridge Family.
Nice.
And so I really became, loved the music, loved listening to Casey Kasem and the American Top 40. I guess I would be classified what you call a bedroom DJ back then, sure. Because when tape recorders came out, then I would take my records or hold my tape recorder up to the radio and start making my own mixtapes.
Yeah.
Well, then it was high school that I came across one of my classmates that was telling me that he had gotten a job as a DJ at a local bar. And even though drinking age was 21, you only had
Okay.
to be 18 to be in the bar. So, and I remember telling him I would love to do something like that. I would love to do something like
And
that. Well,
you're
I really
at
didn't
the
know
time you're in
how.
high
Yeah.
school yet.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes. I was still in high school. Well, then a year later, I ran into another in college now. I ran into a guy I began to talk to, and then I realized, oh my gosh, we had one disco in our town, and here he was the DJ at that disco.
Mm.
Super guy. Seen him play several times, and I was like, oh my gosh, I would love to have a job like that. But I still did not know how to break it. I remember even going to like a wedding or two and going and talking to the DJ and like, how did you get into this? I would love to get into this. And they all just kind of raised their eyes like, yeah, everybody thinks they're a DJ.
Yep.
But it was actually after I got married. Now we're coming forward a few years here. It was after I got married that after about a year that after we were married, we were expecting child number one. And so we went, oh my gosh, diapers, daycare, bottles, oh my, one of us should probably think about getting a part-time job. Well, that wasn't going to be my wife, Lori, of course, because she was pregnant. And so
Mm-hmm.
I decided to take a look, and newspapers were still the thing then. And the next day I opened up a help wanted ad to see what might be in there for part-time work. And there was an ad that said, a local company seeking DJs for private parties.
Okay, let's put a pin in it right
And
there. But I want to go back.
yeah,
College. What did you go to
yes,
college for? What was that kind of, you had an enjoyment of music,
yeah,
you love music, but that really wasn't your career
yeah.
choice.
When I went to college, it was really kind of it was more of what can I find to do as rather than this is what I want to do,
Sure.
because I come from a bloodline of really construction workers, truck drivers, farmers, and I knew that that's not where I wanted to go in life.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went to college and I thought of a couple things. I liked writing. I mean, I thought of doing writing. I thought of maybe doing something technical in the theater because I had done some stage managing, some running light boards and such like that, just coming out of high school. And I kind of looked at that and they said, well, you really don't have to make that decision now.
Right.
They said you can kind of get your gen eds in and then make that decision. Well, long story short, I didn't finish college. I ended up getting a job at a factory and just kind of pursuing that avenue. And before I got married, that's where I ended up at.
Sure. And then, of course, the newspaper. You've had some experience in the newspaper world because that when you came to us with the Disc Jockey News, you had talked about working with that.
Yes.
When did that fit into the?
Yes.
Did that fit in before the DJ? Then I think you just referred to it a little bit, or was it about the same time?
Yes. So I ended up being getting in printing, and I ended up being a press room supervisor for a weekly type newspaper, kind of like a shopper's guide.
Mm-hmm.
And although I didn't have a lot to do with the newspaper itself, I was more the commercial print end, where we would print things like envelopes, letterheads,
Sure.
menus, such like that. But just being around the newspaper industry there, seeing how they put the paper together, and I started to really learn a lot about marketing there.
Mm,
And
sure.
I picked up, I think, more than I ever anticipated that it ever used. But that really was a big help when I decided to go out on my own then.
Mm-hmm. So now let's kind of jump then to that point where you saw the ad in the paper. Take us from there.
Okay, I saw the ad, and the next day I got all dressed up and went, and they just had me fill out an application, and I could actually see like maybe a dozen over there or something like that. But I filled mine out, and when I handed it to the guy that took it, I said, I think I've met you before, which I had. I remember running into another friend one night when we were out and about, and he introduced me to this guy. This is Bob. Bob's a DJ for the Scorpio Productions type thing like
Mm-hmm.
that. So then as I handed my application in, I told him I remember meeting you, and we had a little bit of a conversation. And when I got called in for the interview, I saw that there was like a star on my application. So I take it just by making that connection there with someone that already worked there, he must have put a little star and said, okay, now this one looks like it might be a good fit for us type
Sure.
thing. Yes. And so that's how I started then. I started working for this multi-op company. But the multi-op company, heck, then this is the 90s now, mid
Mm-hmm.
90s. They were still doing vinyl records.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and he had a staff of like 9 DJs, and we were trying to tell him like, listen, we can't get new music on vinyl records anymore, and he just did not want to change. He said, well, I'll convert to CD when the life of my vinyl is done.
Mm,
Well, that's not how it works when people want new music.
yeah, for
And I
sure.
really knew that that was probably that business was not going to be there much longer. So after just maybe just short of 2 years, by that time, the people at the Buke Advertiser where I worked, I was kind of saying, I don't know how much, how long they're going to be in business. And then the general manager started encouraging me. I just think you should do your own. I'm like, I never tried anything like that. But really, with what I've learned from marketing and with their encouragement, that's when I decided to go out on my own and create my own company. And of course, my wife was like, "Oh, hope you know what you're doing."
Exactly.
But the the joke here is we turn on the TV today. We still have electricity. We still can get Sports Center, so everything must have worked out
It must
okay.
have worked out. So those
Yeah.
early days of first couple of years, and you were working for that multi-system. What were a couple of the things you look back and there were lessons or things that you had learned and picked up during that time that were able to help you grow? Because usually when we have an experience like that, it's easy to point to the things that's like, I wouldn't do I'd do that differently and that differently. But there's going to be some positives that you picked up during that time. What were a couple of those?
You know, um, what I really found out was, and by good fortune, there were a couple of radio personalities in the area that were that was their weekend thing. And so I learned a lot from them. And really, the thing I think I picked on up more so than anything was the emceeing skills you have may be just as or maybe even more important than your music skills.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I found that the difference was when just being trained by some of those guys that were just great MCs was such a help, because when I
Sure.
would go out and about to a cousin's wedding or something like that and see somebody that just had got a collection of music and decided to buy themselves some equipment, I mean, they were just deadpan.
Yeah.
They wouldn't say anything at all on the microphone through the whole dinner, cocktail hour, dinner hour, and maybe make some rough announcements. And after that, if party really got going and people would actually applaud, they would grab the microphone and say, "Thank you," and that would be it. And I just really
Woo!
found out that it takes not only that, again, that music knowledge, that mixing skills, just as much of it is being able to learn how to talk to a group of people to energize them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What a great thing to learn early in your career.
Hmm.
Because for so many of us, we didn't pick that up until, in some cases, until we were all of a sudden at a DJ convention in the 2000s.
Yes,
And
yes,
yeah, that definitely changed. So you decided to make the jump to go out on your own. Kind of
yes.
explain that you had mentioned, of course, your marketing. You had some marketing knowledge coming from your newspaper or working for the printing side of it. What were some of those early struggles that you were able to kind of work through and learn some things from as you started to build your
Yeah.
business?
Yeah, being an unknown is always the biggest challenge. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, like anyone, it was, I'm telling potential clients that I have, you know, hundreds of music titles, and truthfully, I'm talking hundreds, not thousands
Yeah,
back
exactly, and
then.
that was a
I have
thing at
hundreds of
that
music
time.
titles.
For us, that was
Yes.
a huge selling point. Whoa, you've got all of those artists! Wow.
Yes, yes, exactly. And um, and I would tell them I had state of the art equipment and dance floor lighting, things like that. It was pretty generic. And most often, so then, of course, what's the biggest caveat? And I can beat anyone's price. I mean, I think we all started out probably
That's
as that guy.
yeah, that's how it
And
was.
even still with that, I guess, marketing and the paper that I worked with, they were good enough to get put an ad in the weekly paper for me, which was a
Mm.
help.
Oh
And
yeah.
then they sold wedding invitations, and a couple times people came to them and said, would you like to bring your wedding invitation books? to be part of our bridal show? And they say, yes, we can. And they would send me with the wedding invitation books. So that way I could kind of work a double header there. I could
Mm-hmm.
let them know that I was selling the invitations, but oh, by the way, on the side, I also do a DJ business, which
Sure.
was, I mean, again, really beneficial back then. But still, you know, again, it was a generic angle I was going with, and I just, if somebody knew me, it was like a friend of a friend or something like that, I was getting some business. But then I just really found out that I had to have a new approach, and that's when I started searching for some marketing experts. I remember Rick Brewer for our industry was one of the first ones that I came across
Mm-hmm.
that was a marketing expert, but he dealt with specifically weddings. And I started to follow and pick up on some of the things that Rick had said. And, I learned that rather than giving everyone my sales pitch, I really had to ask questions and let them tell me what they wanted rather than me telling them what I had.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think that my business really began to grow when, what's that saying? You have two ears and one mouth for a reason. Listen
Yep.
twice as much as you talk. And when I kind of made that transition, that was a big help.
So what year did you kind of go out on your own then?
It was right around 94 that I left the multi-op, about like maybe another year later, close to a year later, when I was really finally able to kind of get out there and I had enough of my own equipment, my
Mm-hmm.
own music library. And I still remember that I had at that time a set of compact discs that they called DJ tools. And these were
Oh
like a
yes, yes.
compilation set. Yes, a compilation set of the most common songs played at wedding receptions. So I had my DJ tools and I had a case of 60 CDs. And I remember the first gig looking here and I got this and I said, I'm loaded for bear.
Yep.
Yes.
These little totes
Yes.
with their
Yes, I did. Yes.
and
But so yeah, it was about right around there, 95 or so that I started off. And I guess I should tell you kind of how the name was born of the company Alexis Entertainment. When we kicked around some different names when we started, they were probably the generic names, I guess, the Gemini Sounds, the Ultimate. I mean, we were just looking for something. And then again, the marketing director that I worked with said, well, at that time we just had one child. His name was Alex. And he said, maybe you should name it after your son or something like that. And so we called it Alex and Us. And we took this ampersand, turned it sideways, pushed it all together, and thus was born Alexis. That's where it was born from.
oh,
Yes.
funny.
So we thought it was pretty tricky at the time.
Oh
And
yeah,
then, oh, by the way, because we started with an A, we were kind of at the
at the
top
top.
of the food chain, and which was a big thing then, the yellow pages.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
So for those of you who are younger and watching this, Mike has mentioned a few things that probably have no
Yes.
newspaper print ads in that time frame. In our
Yep.
especially in our semi small town newspapers, you could have a quarter page ad for $25 and they
Hmm.
would be seen and people would get these smaller town newspapers. Yellow pages were a huge way. I mean, there were times we were spending thousands of dollars a year and getting huge results out of these yellow page ads, which could have been a box ad. It could have been just a bold line listing in the yellow pages, but they worked. Not anymore,
Oh yeah.
but
Yeah.
they did work.
Yeah.
They had their time. So you
Annually, when the new yellow page ads came out, when the new phone book came out, that's the first thing most of us did was grab it, flip it over to disc jockeys, and see, yeah, who knew
who
was in the business
Yeah, exactly. Where if our ad
or
was
who
there,
was no
if it
longer
was
there.
right,
Yes.
and then who the competition is, and
Yes.
we always did
Yeah.
the flashback to the in the movie The Jerk when Steve Martin opens up the phone book and he's looking for now
Yes.
John,
Exactly.
I'm somebody, yeah, and that's every DJ during that era.
Hmm.
We all did it.
Yes.
Oh, good stuff there. So, so you get the early 2000s. Then that's when you started to find people like Rick Brewer, and it really helped you.
Yeah.
Helped you with it. When did you start then? Because you've had a few people working with you within the company
Yes.
there. So when did
Yes.
that start?
Actually, when I think it was probably like the late '90s when I first came across Rick, because the first seminar I ever attended was called the Mid America DJ Show, and down in Louisville, Kentucky. And
Yes.
I came across a guy named, he was kind of like the the headline speaker, I guess you'd say, Screaming Scott.
Oh, yes.
Yes. And I'm like, who is this guy? And of course, as I went to more shows, I ran across Scott more often, and I've gotten to know him, and him and I still keep in contact yet today. Yes. But yeah, so it's probably right around that 99 2000s when I really started to, I was a subscriber to, which was our Bible at the time in the industry, Mobile Beat magazine. I would
Hmm.
read that all the time, and then I began to go to the different DJ seminars, and I just can't understand anyone that says what a waste of time, because I attribute a lot of the fact that I was able to make it till I was old enough to start collecting my Social Security check, to being able to go to all of those different seminars and conventions over the year. I don't think there was one of them I ever walked away from that I said, well, I got nothing out of that. I
Hmm.
always came home with something useful out of those.
And a lot of that kind of pertains around the idea we didn't have the internet like we do today. We didn't have many of the
No.
resources. So for us to be talking to other DJs, first off, didn't happen much in our own market, for surely.
Mm-hmm.
And we would able to go to Louisville, or we would go to Chicago, Cleveland, wherever these events were being held in the Upper Midwest
Mm-hmm.
in the late '90s and early 2000s. it was a it was a great experience because I could go in there and I would be talking to DJs from Iowa, from Louisville, from Florida, for wherever. They were from all
Mm-hmm.
over the country. Virtually nobody from Minnesota, and people would
Yeah.
share, and you'd learn so much, just in all aspects of it.
Mm-hmm.
It was just
Oh yes,
fabulous.
yes, yes. I mean, and everything was covered, from marketing to equipment to music programming. Everything was covered. If you've gone and have not found a nugget there that would improve your business, I think you went already with that decision made.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's a preconceived thing right there that I'm not going to
Yep.
learn anything. Yeah, you probably won't. It's
Yep. Yep.
for a lot of us, that was the spot. You mentioned DJ Tools. That's where we found DJ Tools the first time, was at a
Yes.
convention, because they were being suitcased at many of the
Yeah.
conventions
Yes.
early on. Um,
Yes.
but yeah, for those of you wondering, DJ Tools was a set of CDs that were produced by out of a company out of Chicago was making those, and it was basically all the big songs. And there were times where 90% of the songs you were going to play at a wedding came from DJ Tools or the Mobile Beat Top
Yes.
200 or any of
Yeah.
those services.
Even when I look at the DJ Intelligence that just came out in January of this year, I look at the list. A lot of those songs that were there in the
Are
90s are
still there.
still in like the top 25 or at least the top 50,
Yeah, that's
and
unreal.
they were featured on the DJ Tools. Yes.
Yeah, they're still there after all these years.
But yeah, kind of back to that original question then. Yeah, so started out on my own, but then all of a sudden my business started to grow. So then I'm like, I'm going to need help here. And so then I hired a second guy, and then, I hired a third guy. And by 2008, I finally said to my wife, I mean, by this point, we were doing over 100 events a year. There was,
Mm,
three of us here. I said, this is no longer a full-time, part-time job. This is as much of a full-time thing as my 8 to 5 job at the newspaper.
yeah.
And of course, that was about the same time that the internet was really starting to have an impact.
Hmm.
And I could kind of see the writing on the wall where the newspaper was going too. So I thought I might be well served to try to segue into this as my full time career, because I don't know if the newspaper is going to be there. And
Exactly.
again, my wife said, if you think you know what you're doing,
Hmm.
Lori has been really supportive. And so then, yeah, it became full time. And I mean, there was only once I can remember, John, when I thought I had everything worked out budget wise and we could make it through that first winter. I thought I had enough money put away, and I was coming up short.
Mm,
And I was going to have to tell my wife I was wrong.
hmm.
I was wrong. And I'll never forget that week somebody came in and booked me for their wedding, and they said, well, can I just pay the whole thing in full now? I'm like, oh, sure. Like, that got me through. And then, that was as close as I came to saying, okay, this didn't work.
Hmm.
But it kind of grew from there. I mean, I think our peak, like around from 2015 to 2018, 18 or 19. Then there was five of us here.
Wow.
There was myself, and ironically, I told you the guy that I met when I turned the application in, he ended up coming to work for me years later. Matter of fact, so did the
Wow.
other guys that were there that were the radio personalities.
Mm-hmm.
And then we had one guy that just kind of did like our uplights. We had purchased that's I think up probably the peak there, right in between that mid 2012 through 2018, something like that. That's when uplights were just a huge thing. And so we had a guy that Keith, his name was, that just came in and programmed our lighting systems for the uplights. He was theater trained and the
Sure.
best
Enjoyed
lighting
that.
guy in the area type thing like that. But yeah, I mean, I think in 2018 we really kind of overextended ourselves. Probably we booked 99 weddings that year,
Oh,
and that was maybe just a little over half of the events that we're doing. And that sounds good, especially the bottom line. But when you start getting up to that number, then you're starting to try to just pretty well do the McWeddings, as Randy Bartlett would always call them. You're
yes.
not doing 99 weddings, you're doing one wedding 99 times.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of, we're kind of falling back on a generic template because there was too many. And when people would start to ask us for something, hey, we're ready for that special song I wanted you to play for my dad. And then you go,
Yeah, exactly. It's like,
I forgot
what?
that.
Oh, I forgot that.
I forgot that.
Yeah.
And now I'm scrambling.
Yeah,
Yes,
exactly.
yes.
And
So,
again, we're
but yeah,
the ability to download a song, it wasn't quite
yeah, but yeah.
always
But
there.
then after that, and then after, 2018, I just told the other guys, I said, we've got to cut it back. We've got to cut it back to more manageable. So that was the goal in 2019, which we did. And then, of course, 2020 came along and COVID, and we cut way back,
Really quickly,
as,
unfortunately.
is, as did everyone.
So during the 2000 teens, early teens, there were you just basically doing weddings during those years, or were you doing other events on the side?
No, I was doing I was the DJ for all occasions then.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, weddings was still, and I have to say that when I began, I built the business plan and I still have it. And I mean, it's changed throughout the years what our goals were, where our marketing was going to be, what events was going to be our focus and such like that. So I was doing, the company picnics, the school dances, the 5K runs. If
Mm-hmm.
somebody asked me, I would do it. And then there was things that I found out that I wasn't just real good at type things. And so those things started to come away. But for the most part, we were wedding focused because, let's face it, in our geographical area here, at least that's where the money is
Yeah,
type thing.
for sure.
Yes.
So in the Upper Midwest, when you mentioned you guys did 99 weddings that year, you have a wedding season from point to point. What is the typical wedding season run for you guys when things kind of get busy, and then when does it tail off in the fall?
Yes. Yeah. It was always, every now and then we'd maybe have that spattering of weddings in that January, February, March, maybe four, a half a dozen would be a lot. But it was typically once the snow started to thaw, we started to see April roll around. I mean, I remember just like hating it when Easter was late because for a lot of people,
Mm-hmm.
wedding season started after Easter.
Yep.
We're like, oh my God, Easter's April 19th this year or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But it was typically after that, that mid-April all the way up until the end of October, and it was always September and October were the busiest months all the
Yeah.
time. I mean, that in our area here, at least that was it, in which I would remark a lot to a lot of our wedding professionals in the area. I'm like, most people kind of wind down as they get towards the end of their season. We actually wind up
Yeah.
because
Precisely.
we finish with a bang. Our busiest. I mean, there was a time I remember that we did three weddings on a Friday night and came back and did three weddings on the Saturday. And then the next weekend we did two on a Friday, two on a Saturday, and one on a Sunday.
Mm.
So that was an 11-day stretch, and we did 11 weddings in that stretch.
Hmm.
That was probably the most we'd ever done in one stretch. But doing sometimes, yeah, 3 to 4 weddings, maybe sometimes even 5 weddings in a weekend was not that uncommon. But then that's when I kind of started to say, okay, we're not doing Sunday weddings anymore, or we're
Yep.
not doing the weddings, that Sunday or Monday over those 3 day weekends like Memorial Day, the 4th of July, Labor Day, stuff
Whatever.
like that.
Yeah.
That's kind of when I start going, okay, we've got our price point up high enough now that we don't have to do everyone that comes down
Mm-hmm.
the lane here.
Yeah, and that becomes that burnout you would feel after doing once it kicks in
Yes.
there. Oh,
Yeah.
that catches a person, and just about the time where it's really getting bad, that's when it's like, oh, now we have to be ramping up because in August we've got double back to backs. Yay!
Yes. Yeah.
Oh,
Yes.
yeah, that I remember those times quite vividly.
You
Um,
make all kinds of money, but you don't enjoy getting to spend any of
yeah,
it.
that was about it. That was about it. Um,
Yeah.
so when you started to, you mentioned of course that you're doing different games and such. When did you start to look at the idea of implementing some things to your company as a transition? Because you mentioned of course
Yeah.
with COVID, that kind of changed the
Yeah.
mindset. When was that though?
Actually, yeah, that kind of came about in 2008 when I said, it's time to go full time.
Mm-hmm.
But I really knew that probably not going to be able to just make it. Just doing that weekend wedding, school dance, things like that. Needed to look at some other things. Karaoke is not my thing. And so again, my good friend Bob and he decided, well, if you're going to go full time, so am I. And we really knew that we had to find something different, something
Mm-hmm.
something midweek that we could kind of keep that cash flow going, if you will. And Bob came across this thing called trivia nights, and we had never ever heard of them around here at all.
Mm-hmm.
And so Bob kind of looked at that, and so we kind of looked into it, and we did the very first trivia night in our area ever in 2009.
Hmm.
And at that time we were thinking that this would be great for fundraisers,
Sure.
which it still is. But so I remember we did our first trivia night fundraiser for a Catholic school here in town, and then a little bit after that, we did another one for a drum and bugle program as a fundraiser. And so, yeah, that started to take off. But at one time, then Bob was doing a couple in a week's time. And I was doing, oh, I should back up myself a little bit. We never even thought that maybe this would be a thing for bars
Mm-hmm.
type thing. But somebody approached Bob and said, would you ever do this at like a bar? And oh, yeah. So he started doing, we ended up booking like 4 different places that we did weekly trivia events for. He would do 2 and I would do 2. But
Hmm.
by then, really, when I went full time, that's when the wedding business really started to go.
Mm-hmm.
That's when I was really kind of getting some good marketing chops and such.
Sure.
And so after a couple of years, I said to Bob, I said, listen, if you want to continue with the trivia thing, go for it. If you need help, let me know. But I think I'm just going to concentrate really kind of on the weddings, maybe some of the other things like the school dances and things. But then it was, I believe, 2013 or 14. I'd have to ask Ron Ruth again because Ron and I were together. And during Mobile Beat Vegas, I was there and I came across this thing called Extreme Bingo.
Hmm.
And I
Mm-hmm.
looked at
Yeah.
that. I went, now there's an idea. It's not near the work because at that time, I mean, trivia was so new, you couldn't go to a company and get like a database of questions. You
Questions.
had to
Yeah.
come up with all the questions yourself. And I said, that sounds like a lot easier. So I purchased the program, experimented with it for about a year, and then I began using it again for like Christmas parties. I did a fundraiser with it. And then same thing happened. Somebody called me and said, hey, do you remember me? You did our wedding like 5 years ago. I'm like, oh yeah, sure. Not really.
Mm.
He said, well, we bought a bar. Could you come down and do karaoke? And I'm like, I don't do karaoke. But then I went, but I do have this bingo thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so then I started to do the jukebox bingo there like every week. And then sure enough, then a couple other places contacted me. And so that's when I really started doing the jukebox bingo program along with the weddings. That was like 2016. And then as the success of that went, and it was probably right around 2020 that we started going, okay, maybe it is time to start pulling the reins in here a little
Mm-hmm.
bit and things. And that's when I start looking at some of the, other options, other games, smartphone trivia, some things like that we could do to maybe work more midweek things and less wedding weekends type
Mm-hmm.
thing.
Yeah, because I remember our conversations as we were getting into the 2019 and in early 2020. We were looking and thinking it was going to be just this huge year in 2020, and you were
Yes.
talking about the idea that if once it starts to slow down, then you are going to be looking at putting those steps in to get it to
Yes.
step back. And every year, well, earlier than that, the trolley 2016, 2017, 2018, every year you'd have it wasn't this year. It didn't slow down for me.
Yep.
Maybe next year they'll
Yep.
decide they don't want to be hiring. And it just continued. And how much of that do you think had something to do with people seeing you out there doing the trivia or the bingo or any of those types of things? Was that part of your name and brand getting out there enough and people saying, "Hey, I want you to do my wedding"?
There was some fallback to that.
Mm-hmm.
There was some like, yeah, I saw you, and then, oh, you do weddings too, type thing like
Mm-hmm.
that. And
Sure.
I'm like, well, I should probably mention this a little bit more often when I'm at these places. And so there was quite a few people that became like regulars at my bingo nights that then approached me and said, hey, we are getting married and things and such. And so I did their wedding. So I mean, there's a saying. I think I used to work with a guy that used to tell me that dimes make dollars. Well, of course, he was talking about money, but what it really means is little things add up to big things, and
Yep.
just every little thing that you do will funnel into something bigger. And I think between, I really concentrated with the business plan again. I mean, here's what we're going to advertise, or here's the bridal show we're going to do. But as time went on, my business plan kind of more evolved to do more of a networking.
Sure.
And I really developed like a strong relationships with a whole lot of banquet managers here in the area. And I would say that was where the lion's share of my business for weddings came from.
Hmm.
I
Okay.
I mean, I was getting referrals from probably over a half a dozen different banquet halls here in the area,
Very nice.
and so I really didn't need to do bridal shows anymore or run the ads in the newspaper anymore and things like that. So I think between being seen more out in public was a help, establishing that relationship with the banquet managers was a help, and just the program that I had, the initial phone call, which I had follow-ups or emails, which had the whole follow-up process was a help. The the steps rather than just sending out a contract like, great, we'll see you next June or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
The steps I put in place to keep in contact with the couples before their wedding, and also some follow-ups after the wedding. I think all of those played a role into really kind of building the business. And I mean, not as much as that is prevalent in the games that I do now and the other events that I do. But I still think, over the years, I acquired like, I think almost a dozen awards from Wedding Wire, the Couples Choice Award,
Mm-hmm.
which you can really use that in marketing. I also was named like the best of the business here locally. They have like a contest every year in all the different categories. So just the name recognition, the marketing, the the constant follow up, the networking that I did. I think that all played. There was not one thing I could point to say that was it. That's what you have to do. I think it all comes into play eventually. And I have to say that writing for the Disc Jockey News was a big plus.
Mm-hmm.
When you sit down with a couple and in your home office and they can see all these awards hanging on your wall, and then you mention, well, now, this is my full-time job, but I also write a monthly column for the Disc Jockey News. So I've gotten to know DJs all over the country. And I remember talking to one in Sacramento that said, that's a subliminal big selling point.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of establishes you maybe a little bit more of a professional now. Okay, he's a writer, he's a full-time DJ, as opposed to this guy that works at the warehouse but does the DJ gig as his weekend warrior thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely a big a part of that package, part of that toolkit, for lack of a better way to describe
Yes.
it. Yeah. So let's continue on our kind of chronological. We went to February in 2020.
Mhm.
And at that time, we were still looking and thinking that it was going to be a big year. And you spoke on
Mhm.
stage in Las Vegas, which was a really cool thing there.
Mhm.
And then we went home, and the world stopped.
Yes.
How did that part of the fit into this picture of you transitioning then in your DJ career?
Okay. Yeah, I mean, when the world stopped turning, as they said, what are we going to do now? Luckily, even us like entrepreneurs were allowed to collect some kind of unemployment to kind of keep us afloat there and things. But I mean, we really had no idea where we were going from that point, how long this really was going to be, what was the long lasting effect. We really didn't know. Fortunately, I guess Iowa was one of the first states to open up. I mean, we shut down on St. Pat's Day, March 17th, 2020, but the governor came along and said by the middle of May, let's go again. So it really wasn't that long of a shutdown like this Illinois right across the river for me here. They were shut down for quite a bit longer than what we were.
Sure.
And so I think we did our first wedding already in 2020 during Memorial Day weekend.
Mm.
And we still had plenty of people that were still not comfortable having a wedding type thing. And there was a few cancellations,
Mm-hmm.
but a lot of them did reschedule for the following year and such like that. So, but it was during that time that a couple things happened. One, I lost a couple family members in the December of 2020 through the pandemic. That gave me some pause. Like maybe I need to rethink what's really important in life here. And then when we did start taking off, some of the other guys that did work for me kind of started saying, you know what, I don't know. I mean, I did kind of enjoy not being oh, out at a wedding every
Yeah.
weekend
Mm-hmm.
type thing. I really, I tell you what, I'll do the ones that you have on the books for me, but I think that's it. And then Lori said to me, are you going to be looking for more help then and things like that? And I said, I think it's time. I think it's time to just kind of let the wheels of the bus kind of start to slow down here a little bit. And by that time, we had already, back to the business plan,
Mm-hmm.
had kind of known where I was going to be age wise after this. The other guys were leaving.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we had our second child in just graduating from college in 2020, and one more left. And we just kind of went, okay, here's the things that we need to do. I mean, we really need to pay any outstanding debts, pay off the mortgage, just really kind of work to that point to where we can start not depending on having to make X number of
Yes.
dollars every week to hit the numbers that we need and things like that. So it was with that instead of really after 2020, instead of really pushing like the wedding business, that's when I started really to push more of the jukebox bingo and some of the company things. I mean, it's not all been just a jukebox bingo. Just this not this past week and the weekend before, I ended up doing like three bingo things, and then I did an awards ceremony for a company on Friday night, and then I ended up doing uh, I guess it's a gala for a volunteer fire department. A lot of smaller towns have volunteer fire departments that then they need to raise funds for, and I've done that for like 5 years. So even though I'm not doing, just the weddings that I was doing, I'm still doing between the bingo, the company things, stuff like that. I've got Wednesday. I've got to meet with a community theater that I'm working with here for a fundraiser. So I'm still finding those kind of things that
Mm-hmm.
still it doesn't make the money that a grand wedding will, but it's still enough. I mean, we've met our financial obligations. Really, we've paid off our mortgage. We've paid off our children's part of that we were paying for their colleges are.
Mm-hmm.
We really kind of followed some of the advice of Dave Ramsey and stuff like that,
Sure.
and worked our way out of debt because we knew I would be turning 62, I think, in 61 or 61, I turned in 2020. So we knew I was going to be turning 62 in 2021 and things. And so we really kind of worked, made that target goal that before I hit 65, we wanted to be able to say I can live off of some retirement benefits and some of these other, for lack of a better word, I guess, smaller events
Hmm.
that I'm doing. And I have to say, it's so far it's worked out really well.
So you, of course, were a wedding DJ for so many years. You're picking, doing one here, one there, depending upon if it's somebody who has like,
Yeah.
hey, Mike, I really, want you to do the wedding. But I want you to talk a little bit about the feeling of aging out, because we've had that discussion on many of our
Oh yeah.
shows. Um,
Hmm.
you had that, and again, flashing back to that 2017, 2018, 2019 conversation you and I had. When are we going to get there?
Yeah.
And that statement of it's always with me.
Uh,
Yeah, as soon as they stop
yes.
hiring me, I'll know that I've gotten there, and yet it didn't. So, talk a little bit
Yeah.
about though that concept of aging out and how you felt about that, and when it
Yeah. And to quite honestly, even after pandemic, and I was, still getting calls. John, I've probably turned down more than 3 dozen wedding inquiries this year. I mean,
mm,
now some of them were just like, you know, going through an internet search, and
right.
chances are I wasn't getting those anyhow. But some had seen me at other weddings or something like that, or and for one reason or another, I remember one, I told them that, he had seen me at another wedding and his was kind of a distance away. And I said, yeah, I just don't travel that far anymore. And he's like, even if we pay you more? I was like, and it was still no. I mean,
Yep.
there was a few things that really started to come into play there. I mean, one, when you're at a wedding and you realize not only are you the oldest wedding professional there, I mean, you're older than the photographer, you're older than the videographer, you're the wedding planner, the
Yep.
bartenders, the banquet manager, and you're also older than the parents of the bride and groom. You do start to feel a little out of place.
Yeah.
And so that was one of them. And so I really, again, didn't want to wait to that point where my phone just quit ringing. I'm like, uh-oh, now what am I going to do?
Right.
I just really knew that it's time. And I always thought when I ever reached that time and I thought this is going to be my last wedding, there would be tears in my eyes and things, but that never really occurred.
Hmm.
I mean, probably much like an athlete, a football, basketball player feels or something like that. You just kind of start to realize that maybe your heart isn't as much into it as it was 10, 12 years ago or something like
Mm-hmm.
that. And so I knew that it was time to kind of start kind of segueing into the next part of this career.
Mm-hmm.
And then I did notice again that there was a lot of people. I remember interviewing a couple times Keith Allen, um,
Yep.
that for a couple of the articles that we did for the Disc Jockey newspaper. And I mean, he had reached that point before me, and he kind of said that about the same thing. You just kind of know when it's time. But he had found so many other things to do once he got away from weddings that I knew it was possible.
Mm-hmm.
There was a couple other ones. Dan Nichols, who used to write for us as well, had gotten away from weddings, and I mean, he does a little bit bigger games than I do. I mean, he's packing up and traveling around the country and getting thousands of dollars for some of his games and things like that. I still rather kind of keep myself close to home.
Right. Yep.
But yes, but that's kind of when I knew that the time was coming, and that's then the marketing switch. That's where I was
Mm-hmm.
really trying to push the things, and just to kind of get the local kind of game type things, those company events, maybe again a 5K run or something like that. Yes. Um, and there's a lot less stress.
There we
There's a
go.
lot
That's
less
that's
stress
how I
when you're
wanted to
doing
wrap it
something
up
like
with.
that.
Is talk about the stress, how that has changed from being an
Yes,
active.
there's just, I mean, there's a couple things there. I mean, there is always that stress because and again, for maybe some of our younger viewers, when we started DJing, I mean, DJs kind of evolved as like a cheap alternative to a band back maybe in the 80s, early 90s, and things
Mm-hmm.
like that. And then, as we evolved, people found that we were experts. We were experts. We were great MCs. We knew music.
Yep.
I mean, our music lists were 21 songs or something like that. I mean, they just depended on us to be able to, there was many times, I don't care what you play, I just want a great party.
Mm-hmm.
That was a big thing. But as time has evolved and as weddings gotten bigger budgets, there's also, with bigger budgets comes bigger expectations. And I
Very
think
so.
it's out of Indianapolis, Jim Cerrone, that has kind of said it here in the past few years. Like, weddings aren't celebrations anymore. They're productions. They are productions like a Broadway production.
Yeah.
And that is so true. So that is the added stress. And then now that everyone has a cell phone that they can get any song in the world, and now they want to micromanage the playlist, and we're not the expert anymore. And trying to trying to let people know that sometimes what you like to listen to and what your guests will dance to isn't always the same thing. Some will listen, some won't, and that gets to be a stress. Well, you played all my music, but no one danced, so you must not be any good. And at that point, I'm like, okay, let somebody else try to take this. Yeah.
Yep. Yep. It's time to move into something that's
Yeah.
a lot less
And I tell you,
stressful.
yeah, since I've kind of gone, to the semi-retirement, I joined a gym. I feel so much better.
Good.
Um, getting the workout. I just, there was for a while there, it just seemed like I could take 3 naps a day. I was just tired all the time. But joining the gym, having that, less stress, having those weekends free, just makes a whole difference in your life.
That it does. That it does. Mike, our time is up. Oh my gosh, that went
Okay.
fast. We've covered a lot of ground here, my friend. Thank you for being on with me tonight. It's great, great story, great sharing of that process for a lot of DJs out there. I think just
You're
hearing,
welcome, and
yeah, is always a good
yeah, I want to
example.
say thank you as well too, John, because we didn't touch much on that. But I mean, I've been fortunate for two things: that I've been able to find something I love to do and make a living, and I've also had a great hobby job, and that's been writing. I've been with the Disc Jockey News, kind of again a little semi-retired from that now, but
Hmm.
Disc Jockey News with since 2011. So that, I mean, being able to find a job that you love to do and make a living, and being able to find a place where you can exercise another one of your passions has been great. So I've
Yeah.
appreciated it all. Thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you for being part of our process as we help DJs in the industry. That's been a big part of
Yes,
our goal.
yes.
Yeah. Tonight's show, of course, is brought to you by DJ Event Planner, DJEventPlanner.com. The link is in the description of the video. You can go check them out. They've got those tools, the website tools. You can implement those and help run your business better. In about 10 minutes, we'll be back with our second show tonight. We're actually going to have a special guest with us tonight. Jerry Bozzata is going to come in because we're going to dig into the business, the economy, and how that's going to affect our businesses. And Jerry's coming to us to talk about it from the financial side of it. So last time you guys heard him was literally in 2020. He was with us a few times. Well, Jerry's back tonight to kind of help explain a few things and dig into that. So, Mike, once again, thanks for being with me tonight.
Thanks for having me.
Night, everybody.